Welcome to another edition of the Fab Four Free For All. I am your moderator for this exciting episode, Mitch Axelrod, and joining me, as he always does, unfortunately, I'm just
Hey,
kidding.
hey, hey, hey.
Rob Leonard, how you doing, Rob?
That's me. How you doing, Mitch?
I'm all right. Now, you may notice Tony's not here, but we are a foursome, and we are extremely chuffed, excited, tickled pink, as you can see by my shirt.
How'd they come on our show, man? I mean, these guys are famous.
They are very famous. They've sold 20 million albums. Rob, how many of you and I sold?
I think two.
Okay, that's 20 million more than us. But individually, they are Graham Russell and Russell Hitchcock. Collectively, they are a legendary band, Air Supply. So welcome to the Fab Four Free For All, guys.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here.
Lovely to be here, yeah.
It is so lovely to be speaking with you guys. So much history. Now, people may be asking our fans, and your fans hopefully be watching and listening as well, maybe saying, what is Air Supply doing on a Beatles podcast? And rumor has it that you guys are pretty big Beatles fans, huh?
Oh, yeah. So go ahead.
Obsessed. Since a teenager.
Yeah, well, let's start there, if you don't mind. Graham, you were born in 1950 in Nottingham. And Russell, you were born in 49 in Melbourne, two places where the Beatles have had obviously a lot of experiences, especially Melbourne. Let's start with you, Graham, because I know I've seen a couple of videos of you talking about listening to the Beatles on the BBC.
Yeah, I used to listen to, they had a show called Pop Go the Beatles that I think it was on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock.
It was.
So I used to dash home from school to listen to it. And this was in the early days for them. It was early 64. And they had Love Me Do was out, and Please Please Me had just come out. And I was just captivated by the sound. And I know it was in the studio and it was live in the BBC, but it was just so raw and powerful. And there was just four of them, you know. And it's not that it was loud or anything. It was just complete and just that sound, that Liverpool sound that had that power to it, you know. It was just raw and exciting. And I remember I just became captivated by it and I couldn't get enough. It was something I'd never heard before. But I was only, I was 14 years old, so I was very impressionable, but I was being impressed by the greatest band that would ever exist, so it was great.
And was it easy to differentiate them from the other bands of the day, especially in 64?
I did, because at that point I just started to listen. My sisters would listen to Elvis and Paul Anka and a lot of orchestral stuff, which I liked. I loved Elvis,
yeah, of course.
And Little Richard. But the Beatles was something different because the songs were so great. They were their songs, and I thought, oh my, that's fantastic. And it was just a different league for me, and it was obviously meant to be. But at that point, they were such a massive part of the beginning of my career and what I was thinking, that without them at that point, I certainly wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be having this conversation. But I was just completely obsessed, like Russell said, with them, totally. It was just ridiculous, really. But,
Yeah. And Russell, how about you? Because you were in Australia at the time, and you saw them in 64, if I'm not mistaken, live.
Yep.
Where did you see them? Did you see them in Melbourne?
Yes, a very famous venue called Festival Hall.
Yeah.
It was actually looked like a barn, and it wasn't meant for music, that's for sure. But my cousin bought me a ticket for my birthday.
Wow.
So we both, and I think it was June the 18th I went, or very close to my birthday anyway. So, but a school pal of mine that I used to sit next to in high school brought in a 45 of She Loves You. And I hadn't heard them yet. And he said, you got to listen to this. It's incredible. So that sparked me instantly. And of course, when I saw them, I couldn't hear that much, of course, but I'm always, it's one of my bragging points. I got to see the Beatles and you didn't.
I
Yeah.
certainly did.
Graham's the only other person I know that saw the Beatles live. But just the whole thing about them. I mean, that the way they dressed. Obviously, I'm going through the stuff everybody says. The haircuts,
Yeah.
the way they spoke. Just they affected pop culture and culture from the minute they became famous. And I've been, when I was at home, I had my bedroom wall covered in Beatles posters and photos, and I subscribed to their Beatles monthly magazine. I mean, anything that had Beatles on it, I wanted.
Wow.
Mm.
You were in Melbourne, and when they came over, Ringo wasn't with them originally. Now
Right.
they did 2 shows with Jimmy Nicol. I can imagine a lot of people in Australia saying, "I saw the Beatles," and then when you say, "When did you see them?" Well, you saw 3/4 of them. But was Jimmy Nichols playing with them covered big when they came over to you guys to Australia?
Of course, yeah, of course. I mean, I was lucky enough. I was at the first show that Ringo played when he recovered
Oh.
from being sick. So I saw him.
So that
And
would be June 15th.
okay, then that was my birthday. Then, yay.
Yeah. Wow. Nice gift.
But he was there, and I mean, it was just bedlam.
Yeah.
The cliched passing bodies over heads and wet seats when the girls left, and all. I mean, it was just insanity. And they had you might have going to be to mention this, but they had a civic reception at the town hall.
Yeah.
And where they came up on the balcony and they waved for like 2 or 3 minutes. And I think the population of Melbourne at the time was probably 1.5 million or something. And there were 300,000 people.
That's amazing.
Outside the town hall. So, that's just an indication of their strength and their popularity. And I guess we're all kind of in the same boat. You tell people these days about the effect that they had on everybody. They go, yeah, but it wasn't like Michael Jackson. It wasn't like this. And, you tell them it wasn't like anything that's been seen since even. So, a phenomenon.
Why do you think Australia, I mean, out of all the countries, really, they really came out to see the Beatles, as you just mentioned, seeing them outside and waving and stuff. But Australia, the numbers were so big.
Well, I think
you guys were there, so give us a background on it.
Well, it was, the bottom line is Australia is so far from anywhere, and their popularity was so great. And I think, people maybe thought, I've got to go see them because they'll never come back again. They might have one and done in their career. And, it's just so far to get there for any act.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason. But, everybody was obsessed with them. They stayed at the Southern Cross Hotel. And after they left, they were selling 1-inch square sheets, pieces of the sheets they slept on. I mean, it was just mind-boggling,
And they never did come back.
No. Well, I mean, I'm not saying obviously, but I also heard that the guy that took him there was a guy named Ken Brodziak. He was a promoter. And he did a deal. This is urban legend, that he paid like $2,000 for 8 shows.
Wow.
And when they got there, Brian Epstein, being the gentleman that he was and a bit naive, he said to Ken, we're the biggest band in the world now. You can't pay $2,000 for him because that's way too little. And Ken Brodziak said, no, I signed a contract with you before they were famous. And I'm going to honor that contract. So that was a cool thing for him to do.
Yeah. Graham, where did you see the Beatles in '64?
I saw them in Nottingham, my hometown, in the local cinema, in the Odeon Cinema.
Wow.
And they were on a bill that they played a lot. In those days, there were a lot of Liverpool artists. There was, I believe, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Billy J. Kramer, Cilla Black on the bill. There was like 5 or 6 artists. And, I wanted to see the Beatles. And to get a ticket, you had to write in and put your name in a lottery. And a school friend of mine managed to get 2 tickets in the lottery and said, I want to take you. So I went. But there were all those other Liverpool artists. And, seeing them was like, I'd never experienced anything like it. A cinema, maybe there's 400 people there. And it was just so loud and fans screaming. But it just added to the euphoria. I think they played for 20 minutes. And when they came on, it was just crazy. And I'm sure they couldn't hear anything. They were playing through those little Vox AC30s. So they wouldn't have heard anything. I don't think there was even PAs in those days. Maybe it was a Vox PA with 2 columns on either side. But we've said this so many times, it just changed everything. And of course, it changed the whole world, the way music is listened to. It was just different. It's hard to describe how it was, especially to someone that didn't live through it or experience it. It's like Russell just said, people talk about Michael Jackson and even Elvis and a few other great artists, but the Beatles was different. There was something else going on, and it's really hard to describe. But I'm so fortunate to have lived through that and to have my formative years with the Beatles, because that was everything to me. I learned how to write songs from their songs, and I learned how to play guitar, and I played drums, and it was just a learning curve. I went to the Beatles school of music, that's where I learned everything, and still do. You put a Beatles album on now, it doesn't matter which one, anyone, and it's just incredible. Yeah. In my opinion, there are no bad Beatles songs. Even the weird ones, like Why Don't We Do It in the Road or something. it's still a great song,
It is. It's fun. People sit there, they'll tell you Mr. Moonlight, the cover that they did, but you know what? It's still the Beatles. And I always found that I know this might sound sacrilegious, but I always found that the Beatles doing cover songs, they covered them better than the originals. I always thought.
I did too.
Yeah. I just watched that Little Richard documentary on a plane recently, and there's all those great songs that Little Richard wrote, and then McCartney sang a lot of those. But you're right, and that's how they came up with "I'm Down" later. They wanted to write their own versions of songs, which "I'm Down," which is fabulous. But Long Tall Sally, and all those great songs.
And you probably saw that Little Richard still, until he died, said that he taught Paul how to do the woo.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's part of the joke, but
it is.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in Australia to meet with Russell?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
How did you end up in Australia to meet with Russell in the chorus of Jesus Christ Superstar?
I emigrated when I was 17. My parents were already there, my sister was already there, and nothing was going on for me musically. I'd been in a band that was going nowhere, and they were all playing cover songs, which I didn't want to do. And so I emigrated, and when I got there, I started to look for musicians to play with, and I did. But it wasn't until I got in Superstar that I managed to get a part that I thought, oh, great. That was the first time I really was getting a regular paycheck to be in a musical, and for me, that was a big deal. But when I met Russell, I think I met Russell on the first day, and we were doing a dance. We were learning how to do a dance routine, and I sprained my ankle, right? I think it was the first day, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. But let me interrupt just for a minute. Graham's 6'4", so when he fell, it was like a giant redwood just going.
Right.
Continue, mate.
Yeah, and I thought, I'm out of the show. I twisted my ankle really badly. The first day, I thought, oh God, I'm out. They're going to get rid of me. Why would they want someone with a twisted ankle? But you know what? That wasn't the case. Russell helped me get over to two washing machines and dunked my foot in the hot water, then the cold, and they strapped my foot up. And within a couple of days, I was back doing learning the dance routines, still hobbling around. But I was so surprised that they didn't fire me. And I thought, wow, this is it. So we were in, and of course, Russell and I became really good friends. And by chance, Russell sat next to me in the men's chorus room where all the guys were. And he sat next to me. So we started to sing together. And it just sounded really good from the very beginning. And people used to stop by our dressing room and listen to us when we were singing. And sometimes it would be one of my songs or a Beatles song, you know. And we just sounded good, and we knew we did. And it just went from there. Plus, you know, we became really good friends, and we had a lot in common. And we both wanted to do something after the show. So we knew we had 18 months or so to get something together, because we wanted to work together afterwards, and we wanted to earn some money. I don't think either of us wanted to go back to what we were doing before, you know, having a regular day job that was uncertain, you know.
What roles in Jesus Christ Superstar did you get?
We were initially both in the chorus. So we were apostles, lepers, merchants.
Yeah.
You know, we filled up the crowd scenes. But as the show progressed, we both got to understudy I understudied Jesus and Judas and Simon and Annas.
Yeah.
And Graham understudied Peter. And
I think I got to play Peter maybe 3 or 4 times, but it was really too high for me, you know. But I kind of tried to stretch it because I wanted to sing Peter, because he had his own song, you know, with Mary. But I got that. But Russell understudied every male role except for Caiaphas, and played them all several times. So they really made use of his great tenor voice. You know, he was in everything, and just amazing, you know.
Now, you guys had once said, I'm not sure which one of you said it, but you guys will set me straight. You said the Beatles are your only go-to group ever. That's a strong statement.
Well, it's true for me.
Yeah. But why?
Well, the stuff that we just mentioned. I mean, I've never put on a Beatles record. Sorry about the reference to records, folks.
That's
okay. We have plenty.
Any of their songs without taking myself back to the moment. And I've gained a much better appreciation. I mean, I always thought Ringo was great.
Yeah.
But I was still in half of that school that says, well, if it wasn't for them, he wouldn't be this. And,
yeah.
you know, and then I've listened to a bunch of their stuff in the last 5 years, and he was a phenomenal drummer.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
the only drummer that was right for them. So,
Yeah.
And I don't listen to any contemporary music at all. I just it doesn't do anything for me, and
Right.
I feel like an old fuddy-duddy. But I just don't care for it. But I can put myself in a great mood by listening to Beatles records. I can put myself, if I'm feeling melancholy or a little depressed, you know, I'll play those kind of songs in my life and stuff like that. For me, there's a song for every occasion for my mood and my psyche, and I just, you know, I love them to death. I just I was home in Sydney when John Lennon was killed, and of course I didn't know, and one of the DJs from a local station called me and said, you know, what do you think? And I said, well, how about what? And he said, you know, John Lennon's been killed, and I couldn't handle it. I said, I can't talk. You know, the effect of those things on me were far greater than anything, any politician that was unfortunately, lost their lives too early. At that point, there was no comparison. You know.
You know, and I have to ask you because this would probably go more for you, because in Australia, we had the Beatle cartoons here in the U.S. They were very big. They were made for Graham. You wouldn't have seen them because Brian Epstein said he didn't want them shown in the UK. But in Australia, a lot of them were done in Australia. Did you guys? Did you get to see it? You know, Russell, the Beatle cartoons when you were a kid?
Yeah, I did. You know, if there was anything with Beatle on it, I saw it or watched it or bought it or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and they were cute, you know, as I remember. That was a long time ago. Did you see him, Graham?
Yeah, I saw them later on though.
Yeah.
In Australia, but you're right, they didn't play anything like that. But certainly in the UK before I left. But I think I think that was the beginning of, you know, so many things like a cartoon. You know, then the Monkees came out later and they had a similar thing. It was the beginning. It was expanding horizons for artists. Well, for the Beatles, you know, having merchandise. So before that, nobody had merchandise. It was, you know, and then you had Beatles, everything, Beatles lunch bags. So it was the beginning of something, of everything. And they were just the innovators of that, or their manager, Brian, or whatever. But it's so funny, you know, about that whole thing. The one thing that resounds with me is, you know, at that point, I don't think either of the Beatles musically were like profound musicians. But what they created together was profound. And the songs were the best. They were just the best songs of any generation, you know. And I love Rodgers and Hammerstein and things like that. Great songs. But the Beatles just eclipse everything, you know. And it's, as I said earlier, every song is just incredible. But also, they didn't write in one genre. They didn't say, oh, I'm going to write this or I'm going to write that. You can tell it just happened organically. Like, you know, one minute they came up with a song like Revolution or you know, Michelle. Totally different. They couldn't be further apart. And it's just incredible. And for a songwriter like me, who's a novice, you listen, you go, oh my God, you know, wow, it's overwhelming. But there's a lot to learn from that. And I tried to learn what they were doing, but more their intuitive process, you know. People, I've heard on the radio recently, I was listening in the US to a radio show, and they were trying to dissect a song, a Beatles song. I can't remember which one it was. And they were saying, oh yeah, if you dissect it, he did this and he did that, then he tried this. But, you know, I don't believe any of that. I think all their songs were probably written in half an hour. And I don't think any thought went into it. They didn't try to do anything. They just did it because it was inherent in their process. They just did it without thinking about it. And I really believe that. So when people try and dissect it and try to analyze everything, they're barking up the wrong tree. They're missing the whole point. And I go, guys, you're missing it. You know, you're missing the beauty of everything, of something that just happens, just like that. There's no reason for it. There's no explanation. And that should be good enough, you know, the end result. You know, my favorite Beatles song is If I Felt. And people will say, oh, no, there's so many more better ones now. But it was the first song, not the first song of theirs I listened to, but it was the first song that captivated me. It's just so beautiful. And the two-part harmony of John and Paul. And I was like, oh, my God. And even now I listen to it, and it just sends me off into the atmosphere. Just such a simple song, but so beautiful, you know. And, wow, that's what really gets me. It never ends.
You know, that wouldn't be a bad song for you guys to cover. I don't know if
we did, right?
Oh, you did?
We did. We recorded it. I have it somewhere, and it was a great version. But when we tried to get the license for it, it was going to cost a fortune.
Yeah.
Really?
Like, yeah. And so we said, God, what a bummer. We don't want to do it if it's going to cost us like so many thousands of dollars to do it. But we do have it.
I think it was $30,000 they wanted.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've got it here on my computer, and we finished it, didn't we?
Yep.
It was the way they did it was just guitar and Russell and my vocal. Yeah.
Got to come out on a bootleg at some point.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Maybe
we'll help you. We'll help you spread it around.
I've got to interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Talking about what I bought these.
Those are the chew bops.
Yeah, these are
the gum.
Chewing gum.
Is it gum?
All their
That's
albums.
gum.
Yeah.
Those are all the US albums.
Yeah.
And they're not opened.
No.
I wouldn't open it now and chew the gum, though.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'll send you some gum if you'd like, but I'll keep the gum.
Did you get them recently, or have you had them for a while?
I bought them in like 72 or something.
Yeah, I think they were a little later in the 80s, but they were so
Oh,
cool.
well.
No, you know what though? They were so cool seeing the mini albums.
Yeah.
I loved them. I bought them. I never ate them. I have the same thing you have, you know, on eating gum. Where do you guys start with the Beatles albums? Where you started to buy them and say, okay, I really like this, and I'm a Beatles fan. Where does that start for you guys?
Well, as I said, the guy I went to school with, he played me, gave me I think it was "She Loves You," one of those, and I was instantly captured, you know. And as I said, from that moment on, anything that had Beatles on it or sounds recordings, I wanted them. And I was just, I mean, I drove my parents and my sister crazy because, you know, they were, and as Graham said about his music kind of past before them, my dad was a singer with a big band in Melbourne, and we listened to Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett, and there was a very famous lady, Julie London.
Julie London, of course.
All, you know, those, and I loved great singers. And of course, you know, my parents were cool actually, but my mother was one of 8 kids, and my aunts and uncles kept on telling me what a load of trash they were, and their hair was too long, and you know, and like, of course, we all ignored that because they were the greatest thing since sliced bread when they released records or did anything. I mean, of course, I sat up for the All You Need Is Love thing. I think it was at 4:00 in the morning in Australia, that world, you know, broadcast. I mean, anything. I just wanted anything that was Beatles. Of course, then my hair was starting to get curly, and I wanted that Beatles thing, but I couldn't do that. Did you have a Beatles cut, dude?
I tried to, but my hair wouldn't go there either, you know. I mean, I always had a crew cut when I was at school and young, but, you know, plus I didn't have the money to buy Beatle boots or to buy the Beatle jacket or anything, but I saved up and did odd jobs to buy Please Please Me, the first album, and after that I bought With the Beatles. In England it was called With the Beatles, which had All My Loving on and all those great songs, and it's incredible. Like, oh wow, you know. Amazing. I mean, it's hard to think about it, but
you know,
once again, I feel so privileged to have grown up with that. Had I not grown up with that, well, as I said, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But it's just amazing, you know.
You know, Air Supply was no slouch either, though, because at one point you tied the Beatles record of having, you know, 7 straight top 5 singles. That must have been kind of cool.
It was cool, although I think the Beatles had them all at the same time. But
doesn't matter.
I mean, to be in the same sentence as the Beatles is a great thrill for us. I mean, we're not anywhere near anything that they've achieved, but
you know, but I would say that's not true. I mean, you know, you're in a different genre, you know, the 80s versus the 60s. So, you know, I mean, not that I have to blow smoke up your asses, because you guys you know, you probably have enough gold and platinum on the wall that you know this already, but, you know, come on. I mean, I listened to the greatest hits again this morning, and you know, you know every single word of every single song. So, you know, for many people, Air Supply is the same as the Beatles, you know?
Well, that's a great thing to say. I don't know if I agree with you, but, you know, I think we left our mark on music history, certainly. Sure. And when we're gone, I think, you know, some of the songs will all be around. But if you think about the Beatles, I mean, it's 60 years ago, and you hear a song today, and it's like as fresh as it ever was. But by the same token, when I put on some of our, you know, Lost in Love, All Out of Love, Making Love Out of Nothing at All, I mean, they're great records, and I'm always a big fan of that. And I always say, these are great records, and they'll go through time as great records. So I'm very, very flattered and honored that people agree with that, and I certainly do, you know.
As guys who actually went through the Beatle time in real time, meaning that you had to wait 7 months for a record or 8 months. Let's start off. I want to start off with Revolver and move on, because starting with Revolver, things are a little different than She Loves You or Please Please Me. I was wondering what both of you thought of the albums from Revolver on, because there is sort of a line in the sand on what they were doing. There's still pop music, but it sounds different. There's very speed vocals. There's backward tapes. I'd like to know how you guys, as fans and listeners in real time, because when I came along as a Beatle fan, it was in the 70s, so you buy all the records at once and then you listen to them. It's not the same. So I'd like to get your impression of starting from Revolver on.
Well, I on first hearing, I was blown away because, as you said, it was totally different from anything before. And of course, reading stuff that you read about now about the recording process and techniques used or whatever, that was very innovative and experimental. It just was, I really couldn't comprehend some of the sounds on that at all. And I'm not a songwriter or a record man or anything, but I was always fascinated with how did they get that sound. And it's just something that no one had ever heard before.
Revolver sounded different. Sonically, it sounded different. I don't know how to describe it, but you're right. It was so far away from the She Loves You, Please Please Me sound. It was totally different. Songs like Here, There, and Everywhere, which just blew me away. A key change. They go to the bridge and they change the key. It's like, oh, wow, it's just beautiful. But it sounded different. And I think each album was different. And so kudos to Brian Epstein, because he obviously engineered all that and was the guy behind it. But I think at that time, the Beatles had so much success and they wanted to do something different, and they felt they could experiment and begin experimenting with slowing tapes down. And you got to remember too, I think at that point they were still recording on 4-track machines.
They were.
Revolver may have been an 8-track, but
no, it was a 4-track. So was Pepper.
Pepper was 4-track too.
Yeah. The later albums were on a 4-track too.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. When people think about that now, when people are making albums now, us included, you use about 80 tracks, and they had 4, and they did everything live, and it's like, oh my God, how did they do it? But it was an unknown territory that they wanted to explore, and they did it incredibly.
And what about Sgt. Pepper? Because that's a milestone for musicians and non-musicians. It's a time changer if you think about it. What did you guys think of it as a record at the time? Because it's totally different. Even more different than Revolver.
I remember finding out it was going to be available in stores, and I think I was maybe first or second in line, which went around the block several times. And I obviously I was very young, so I had to walk to the store and ran home. And my sister had the only record player in the house, and it was a stereo record player, a box with the speakers facing on the sides. Right. And as soon as the thing started with the overture and here we go again, concept album, first have lyrics on it, you name it. Sounds once again were phenomenal. Mr. Kite, unbelievable sounds, and George's influence again with his Indian stuff. Things that people had never heard before, and I couldn't get enough of that, certainly.
Yeah, the songs, especially on Sgt. Pepper, they just kept getting better and better. And I would say to myself, there can't be any better songs than on this record. But of course, the albums after that were even better. It's like, God, where does it end? But Sgt. Pepper's was, you can't listen to that album without listening to the whole thing. I put it on and you go, okay, that's the beginning, the Sgt. Pepper. Then you want to listen to everything with a little help from my friends, and oh my God, it just never ends.
Well, that's the problem. That's the big problem. And I want to ask you a different question, but you brought up something very interesting, because now there's no such things as records anymore. As and Russell, you apologize for records, but but quite frankly, people don't have the same experience. You go on Spotify, you can pick and choose, but instead of having to listen to 6 songs and pick your butt up and turn the record over and then listen to the other part, it's a different experience for kids nowadays.
It is. It's totally a different experience that they missed out on,
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are other things that they enjoy just as much as we did with the albums. But you're right. It's holding something in your hands and listening to the album and looking at the cover and the concept and the liner notes while you're listening to those songs. That was everything. And, you would play the album, turn it over, and you would keep playing it for hours until at the end of that particular session, you would know every song backwards. You know all the lyrics, what's going on, and it just became your favorite album. But you're right, with Spotify now, it's, you can listen to anything, but everybody predominantly listens to a song, or I'm going to download that song or listen to that song. But it's such a different experience. I don't have Spotify. I don't get on Spotify at all. I'm not into that vibe, But that's because we're a lot older than most people. But it's a different time, different industry now, And I'm sure in the next 5-10 years it'll change again. But because of that, we decided about 10 months ago that we were going to make another album, which may be our last, who knows. But we decided, and we record live like the old school, but we decided, we wanted to make another album like the Beatles used to make, and it's going to be vinyl, and it's going to have a concept. So that's what we decided to do, because if it is the last one, we want to have some like a legacy to leave. If indeed it is the last album, we want to do it how we want to do it.
I wanted to ask you by the way, is that a scoop?
I think it is. Yeah.
Okay.
It is
Cool.
now.
Well, that's kind of cool. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, the Air Supply's heyday was smack in the middle of the Beatles solo period, all 4 of them. Did you still follow them, or were you just too busy with your own careers? And because now they were not only, your idols, so to speak, but now they are your competition for airplay.
Well, I don't think I considered us competition to them, certainly at all.
Well, solo-wise.
Yeah, and I must admit, though, I didn't, I was really, and this is no exaggeration, I was heartbroken when they broke up.
Yeah.
As I'm sure a lot of people were. So I didn't pay that much attention. And also, we were, as you said, in the middle of it. In fact, we used to be on a bus then for 10 months a year, and we would do the show and get on the bus to travel overnight somewhere. And after the first couple of first 2 or 3 hits we had, this is from my perspective, we had a guy on the bus that used to get stuff for us, and coffee or glass of wine or whatever, and he'd rush to the front lounge and go, wow, Even the Nights Are Better is number 8 on the Billboard charts.
Yeah.
And I used to go, that's great, can you get me a beer? We didn't, I didn't, we didn't really have time to stop and appreciate what we were doing then, because we were wrapped up in that touring schedule then was unbelievably difficult physically. So I pretty much didn't really listen to a lot of outside things. Snippets. I loved All Things Must Pass, I must admit, and of course Paul's early stuff was great, but I didn't really have the attachment because there weren't 4 of them together. They'd gone off into the universe on their own.
But you still must have been aware of what they were doing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the whole thing, John and Yoko's journey to get married in Gibraltar, and couldn't get this and couldn't get into that. And I used to, anytime I saw that mentioned or somebody said, by the way, did you read, this? Now, of course, with the internet being what it is, it's in your face every day, no matter what they do.
That's true.
Yeah. I used to certainly follow them because you had to, but not as intently as the Beatles, of course. But what was amazing was, even, you know, when John Lennon did his first solo albums and Paul did them too, the songs were still amazing, even though they were on their own and they were calling each other names. The legend has it. But songs like Baby I'm Amazed, and then you got John's Imagine, and wow, you know, so they were doing it. So I think we were lucky as human beings when they were together, writing together, which I don't think they wrote that much together. It was always individual, but together. I think we were very fortunate to have those years when they did, you know, because for me, everything's all about the song and the songs, and there just weren't any better songs. And I must say, I don't think there is today either. You know, I love songs, but I don't hear a lot of songs today that I go, and people say, oh, you should listen to this, or have you heard this? And I go, listen, I go, you know, I'm not moved like I used to be with the Beatles individually or together, you know.
When you write, you know, John said one thing about there's only so many notes you can use. He said this, I believe, in '75. He was talking about when he got sued for Come Together. When you write, do you know, sometimes nick things, and you know, it's nicked so well we don't know it, but you do of Beatles stuff? Because I can see that. I mean, you know, it's understandable.
Yeah, I'm heavily influenced by the Beatles. I mean, I really am in all my writing. And sometimes, and even on this new album, in the studio, I'll say, is this two Beatles? Because, you know, I'm not doing things that they did. I'm doing it in my way. In fact, there's a new song that we're going to do in September, and it's very Beatles, you know. And our producer Brian, I say, is this too much? And he go, well, no, not at all. People don't hear that, you know. But I'm so influenced by them. Sometimes I'm a bit careful because, you know, there are only 8 notes, you know, and the Beatles have a certain way of writing their songs, and I'm kind of familiar with it. And I don't use those same things, but I use my version of it simply because that's how people write songs, you know. And what I love about those two in particular is they have no musical background or no musical knowledge, and I love that. And that's why everything they do, it comes from a different place that I haven't experienced with any other artist since then.
And what about you guys' harmonies? You guys have a unique harmony sound. You know, I'm sure it's not just the Beatles. I'm sure Everly Brothers might be in there, or some other acts.
Yeah.
But harmony on a song, it does make it a lot better when it works right. Can you describe a song or two of yours that worked harmony-wise that maybe is Beatlesque a little bit at the same time?
Probably Lost in Love, certainly, you know. There's a little bit of If I Fell There on Lost in Love, you know, and it's a simple 2-part harmony that we you know, we never plan who's going to sing what or what part. We've never done that. We just sing it. And, you know, if I bring a new song, Russell listen, and he'll go, oh yeah, and he'll start singing something with it if I'm singing the demo, and we just go from there. So it's totally organic, you know. We never plan anything. But you're right, I used to love the Everly Brothers before I got into the Beatles, and I think the Beatles did too.
They did.
Yeah, they were incredible. Yeah, just super close, tight harmonies. Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
They toured together, right?
Pardon?
The Everly Brothers toured with the Beatles, right? Did they?
I think, I'm not sure if they toured with them. I think the Beatles saw them when they played in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they toured with them, but there was a definite influence by the Beatles.
Yeah.
Or from the Beatles from the Everlys, yeah.
You guys were asked to be on a Beatles tribute album, and you chose The Long and Winding Road. Incidentally, one of Rob's favorite songs. I kid, because it's not
really.
I love that song, but why did you guys choose that one out of everything to do on the tribute album?
Well, that came about with a friend of ours, Billy Sherwood. He's been around a long, long time. In fact, his brother Michael played with us for quite some years until he sadly passed. And I know that Billy said he was doing a Beatles tribute and he wanted us to participate, and he actually chose the song.
Okay.
It was as simple as that. And I mean, who's going to say, sorry, Billy, I don't like that song?
Right.
Exactly.
It was a #1 hit in the States, and as much as Mitch jokes that I don't like the song, I don't, but I also don't like what Phil Spector did to it a lot more than the actual song, because I like Paul's version when he did it live with Wings. I like the version that doesn't have all the Phil Spector strings on it. And I'm sure Paul does too. So I liked when you guys, when you did the song, it wasn't as heavy as the Phil Spector arrangement.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind it as much. It's not the song I hate as much as the overproduction that Phil Spector did on that song.
Produced by Phil Spector.
Yeah,
I believe that Paul didn't like it. He didn't like Phil
No,
Spector.
no, he sued them as part of his lawsuit. That was part of the lawsuit.
But John liked it. That was when a fissure had already come between John and Paul, because John liked it. But it sounds like it was Paul's song predominantly, actually.
It was.
Yeah, but once again, regardless of which version, either the naked one, the acoustic one, the one with the full-on production, they're all great because it's a great song, just classic song. I mean, how many songs do you need to write that are classic and will be around forever? They've had hundreds, and it's like
standards.
It boggles your mind. It's like, oh my God.
Wow. You guys just did, and you guys sell out shows everywhere, and we're gonna give the website where people could go and check out the whole tour. As I said, you're going to be playing in our backyard in early August at Westbury Music Fair, or the NYCB Theater now.
At Westbury.
Corporate is, at Westbury. Thank you, Rob. So we'll get into that in a second. And we're running out of time, but I just wanted to, you guys just played Mexico, and two things in your encore. You play a Badfinger song, which most people equate with Harry Nilsson, Without You, which you guys did on your album The Earth Is. I want to ask you about Without You, and then you ended. You hadn't done it the whole tour, but you did it in Mexico. You ended with All You Need Is Love.
Yeah, well, we do. Yeah, we do that every night.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, that's the play out music for the end of the show.
Okay, so I want to ask you about Without You. First of all, do you have to wear a special truss in order to sing that note at the end? Because when I've tried to sing it, I have to have someone backstage kick me in certain areas so I can reach those notes. But
well, my private parts are still intact, thank you. I remember Harry Maslin produced that, right? G?
He did, yeah.
And he called me, and he said, "How would you feel about recording without you?" And I said, "What do you mean recording without me?"
Right. Yeah.
No, idiot, without you. And I remember specifically we recorded the vocal at Capitol Records in Los Angeles, in the studio that Frank Sinatra used to use for vocals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the track was played, and I listened to it a few times, and this is a really weird experience for me, and everything went black around me. I couldn't see through the control room, anything. It was just me and the microphone and the track, and we did it in one pass, and that's a rarity. But I love the version, and I love the way. I don't pat myself on the back very often, but that was a really good vocal, that's for sure, and a beautiful song,
Yeah, it is.
You still do it really well. I've been watching, a lot of YouTube videos. You still do it really, really well. So that kudos to that, because I know as I've gotten older and tried to sing stuff, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. It's a classic song, and the story behind it is traumatic, and so the whole story of it is a great thing.
Yeah, we don't try to talk about Mariah Carey's version. We talk about Badfinger and we talk about Harry Nilsson. Other than that, and your version, we'll leave Ms. Carey out there.
Well, Harry's family accepted the money, so don't.
Oh yeah, that's very true. That's the only good thing about that.
Let me tell you.
I know where.
Can I just tell you another story real quick?
Sure.
We were in London and we were recording an album there, and the producer, what was his name? Do you remember, Graham?
No.
Peter somebody. Anyway.
Peter Collins.
Peter Collins, there you go. And it was, I don't know, 2:00 in the morning, and I had a flat just very close to Harrods, for those of you who know London.
Yeah.
And he called me at two in the morning and he said, "You've got to listen to this song." So I went over to his place and he played a Jennifer Rush version of The Power of Love.
Wow.
I was blown away, and I called Graham and I said, "We have to do this song. It's going to be one of the biggest things we ever had." So we recorded the song and it sounded awesome. It sounds awesome. And Aristid thought it was too long and they cut some of it out, and it was just so tragic. And it was released the same time as Huey Lewis's Power of Love.
Ah.
So the titles were in competition with each other. And of course, it didn't do anything. And then I don't know how many years later, Celine Dion released her version, exactly the same as ours. Instrumentation, arrangements, everything. And bless her heart, she had a worldwide hit with it. And I was so pissed. I still am, that, our version shoulda, woulda, coulda, but it was an awesome song with a great arrangement,
Yeah.
Yeah. The version, the Jennifer Ruff version, because there were four people that wrote the song. She was one of them. And they'd only done a demo, so we listened to the demo. And they promised they wouldn't release it or record it. And that's why we said, okay, we'll do it. But they released that demo and it became the biggest song in England ever. I'm sure since then it's been big. There are other ones. But, once they released it, then everybody else released a version. We said no. And we didn't play it for 20 years. We haven't played it now for another 10 years. So maybe 30 years we haven't played it,
Well, I want to thank you guys, but I want to ask you one last question. Have you had any experiences with the Beatles themselves individually? I know, Graham, you're a huge Paul fan, and I want to get into that, but any experiences meeting the Beatles at all?
I met Ringo when we were rehearsing at SIR. This was around the time of the LA riots. I'm not sure when that was, in the 90s or something.
92.
92.
And Ringo was rehearsing his all-star band with Joe Walsh and a few other people. Yeah. And the manager of SIR in LA came to me because he knew we were Beatles fans. And he said, Ringo's going to be here in a bit. And I said, "Oh, really?" And he says, "Yeah, I'll hook you up." So Ringo came and he knocked on our rehearsal door. I don't know if you were there, mate. I don't know why you were there.
I wasn't.
Yeah. And he came on
and I hate you for that too.
Right, yeah. And he said, Ringo said, "Are you Graham?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Hello, Graham." And and Joe Walsh was with him, so I met Joe Walsh too. But I should have got a picture, but I was shaking, and I was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, this is Ringo Starr." And so that was the only experience I've had meeting Ringo, but it was incredible. But you're right, I'm a big Paul fan because he's the greatest songwriter that ever was. So, but we've always wanted to meet Paul, but I don't know if it's going to happen. We'll see.
Well, you know what? If hopefully, I'm going to pat myself and ourselves on the back and say we are pretty huge worldwide. So hopefully we will be able to.
Well, Paul's now getting into the podcasting field, so maybe he'll listen to the show on how to do one.
Yeah. I wonder if someone like Paul listens to all the Beatles things going on. I wonder if he does.
Probably not, because I think, quite frankly, he's as Ringo said the other day, talking about the new Beatles song, so to speak, that was just announced coming out. Ringo said, after 30 years of not working on it, when they did the anthology, they said, how come, you guys are doing it now? And Ringo said, because Paul was probably having a slow day. So he never stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 81, God bless him. He never stops. And so who knows, but let's hope you guys get to actually meet him.
I do have one more question. You guys have been together forever. You're great friends. One thing about the Beatles is that great friends can become not friends for a while. What have you guys done? And did you look at the Beatles and say, well, we're not going to do that you've stayed friends all these years?
Well, we don't. Well, first of all, we don't work at anything together. I mean, it is what it is. And it's an incredible friendship that nobody really can understand. I mean, Graham, typically in the show says we've never had an argument. Sometimes there's silence, sometimes people laugh, sometimes people go, "Oh yeah," but that's the truth. I mean, we've always had very defined roles within Air Supply. I can't write songs. I couldn't write one to save my life. And Graham really doesn't want to be, the front guy. And on every level. In fact, Graham said there were a lot of coincidences the day we met. There are so many that it's really silly. Our backgrounds, both working class from England and Australia, so we understood that upbringing. Of course, the obsession was the Beatles. We had the same taste in movies and food, and our birthdays are 4 days apart, 3 days apart. Everything that could be the universe could align for us happened, and we don't question it. I mean, it's just it is what it is, and it's very spooky, but it is.
No, that's important because you said it. You don't write songs, but that Graham does. That's an important thing because there's a competition there about what songs get on the A side or the B side or on the record itself. There's also more money made from songwriting. But at the same time, if Graham doesn't want to be the front guy and you're great at it, then it works very well. I mean, that's an important thing, and a lot of bands don't have that. They don't realize it in the beginning, and then it spreads apart.
Well,
I think people in bands, that there's ego and there's competition between certain members in general, and I think a lot of people think they're a lot better, they're a lot greater than they actually are. But with us, it's the combination. I love writing songs, and Russell doesn't write songs, and that's okay, because I love writing songs more than anything else, and I consider it my job. If we're making a record, it's my job to come up with the songs and to create that thing for us to move forward, But at the same time, Russell is the lead singer. He's the focal point in the band, and I love that because I don't want to be that. In fact, when I don't really care about being introduced during the show, but we do that now for the first time in decades, and it's okay. I just like to be the guy that nobody knows about.
Wait, how does a 6'4" redwood tree not get noticed on the stage?
On the point of ego, I mean, can you imagine when the Beatles became famous, 4 guys that were as individually talented as they were? And that must have been something else to be around too, because obviously, I mean, we have an ego to get on stage. You have to.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine some of that, some of the stuff. And I'm, on hindsight, just having this discussion, I'm quite surprised there wasn't more conflict that we heard about anyway with the Beatles.
Well,
and
you kept mentioning Brian Epstein. Until he dies, he sort of he keeps a lot of things together for the 4 of them. They trusted him outright, and they didn't worry about a lot of things until he passed. So
that's
Yeah. So where can people find out all about the tour? Because you guys are always on tour. Don't you guys do like 180 dates a year?
We do 130.
That's enough.
Who's counting?
So where can people find the website and so they can see you on, get the tickets, see where they're playing next, where you guys are playing? It's
airsupplymusic.com is our site, and of course we're all over Facebook. Air Supply Music, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Airsupplymusic.com, and you guys are going to be touring pretty much the rest of the year, right?
Well, we are. Pretty much the rest of our lives, really.
The rest of your lives. Well, let's hope it's a long time coming.
One more thing, Graham. We're looking at Russell right now, and he's tatted out on his entire body. Do you have any tattoos?
I don't.
Just Russell.
I'm not a tattoo person. I don't know why. I'm just, that's one of the differences that Russell and I have. Russell likes all that, and that's great. I think that's his nature.
Russell's got some great tattoos, man. I mean,
hey.
I didn't expect it, to be honest with you. So
opposites attract. Well, guys, this has been an incredible blast. We really appreciate you being on. We wish you incredible success with the tour and continued success. And please, when the album does come out, we'd love to have you on again. And
I would love that.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you in I'm going to still say Westbury. I don't care. Hopefully
Yeah.
we'll see you there. And again, we really appreciate it. So for this episode, exciting and really, really exciting episode, I have been your moderator, Mitch Axelrod, and joining me has been my friend Rob Leonard.
Thank you.
And have a blast listening to this, people. Thank you so much, Graham and Russell. We really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much. It's a
All
pleasure
thanks for it.
talking with you, and
Thank you.
especially talking about the Beatles. It's fantastic. Thank you so much.